The tension inside the Newman orbit had always been intense, but this time it felt different, heavier, more personal, and far more dangerous. Nikki Newman stood alone in a place that no longer felt like home, replaying the moment Victor Newman had made his decision crystal clear. He hadn't just dismissed her concerns, he hadn't just brushed her aside, he had thrown her out, cutting her off with the same ruthless precision he used in business. For years, Nikki had stood by Victor, weathering storms that would have destroyed most marriages. She had forgiven betrayals, endured manipulation, and even supported schemes she didn't fully agree with. But this time, something inside her shifted. This wasn't just another disagreement, this was a line being crossed. Victor believed he was in control, he always did. But Nikki knew something he didn't. His latest plan had cracks, and she was ready to exploit them. The so-called kidnapping of Lily Winters and her children had sent shockwaves through everyone connected to them. Ashby had been frantic, desperate for answers, running in circles as he tried to piece together what had happened. Every lead came up empty, every attempt to negotiate or uncover the truth hit a dead end. It was chaos, and Victor seemed strangely calm in the middle of it all. That calm had been Nikki's first clue. Victor never panicked when he was orchestrating something, and the more Nikki watched him, the more she realized that this entire situation wasn't what it appeared to be. Lily wasn't a victim, the twins weren't in danger, this wasn't a kidnapping, it was a carefully constructed illusion. And Nikki had had enough of it. By the time the week unfolded, Nikki made a decision she knew would change everything. If Victor wanted to cast her aside, then he would have to deal with the consequences. She wasn't going to protect his secrets anymore. Ashby was the first person she thought of. He had been running himself into the ground trying to fix something that didn't need fixing. Watching him suffer, believing his family was in danger, struck a nerve with Nikki. Despite everything that had happened between the families over the years, she couldn't stand by and let him continue down this path. When Nikki finally approached she could see the exhaustion written all over him. His eyes were sharp but tired, his movements restless. He looked like a man on the edge. "You need to listen to me," Nikki said, her voice steady but urgent. Didn't hesitate. "If you have information about Lily, just tell me." Nikki paused for a brief moment. This was the point of no return. "They're not in danger," she said quietly. Froze. "What?" "Lily, Matty, Charlie, they were never in danger," Nikki repeated. "This isn't what you think it is." Confusion flickered across Kane's face, quickly replaced by suspicion. "That doesn't make any sense." "It will," Nikki replied, "but you have to hear me out." She took a breath and told him everything. Not every detail, she didn't know everything, but enough to paint the picture. Victor had orchestrated the entire situation. Lily had agreed to be part of it. There was no real threat, no real kidnapping, just a plan designed to manipulate outcomes and pressure Kane into a corner. As Nikki spoke, Kane's expression shifted from disbelief to anger. "You're telling me this whole thing is fake?" he demanded. "Yes. And Lily, she's in on it." Nikki nodded. "From the beginnings." Kane turned away, running a hand through his hair. The weight of it all hit him at once. The fear, the stress, the sleepless nights, it had all been for nothing. Or worse, it had all been part of Victor's game. "Why would she do this?" Kane asked, his voice quieter now but filled with hurt. "Victor promised her something," Nikki said. "I don't know what, but it was enough to make her agree." Kane let out a bitter laugh. "Of course it was." Nikki stepped closer. "You don't have to keep fighting this, Kane. There's nothing to fight, your family is safe." But that wasn't the point anymore. Kane turned back to her, his eyes blazing. "Victor used my family to get to me." "Yes. And you expect me to just, what, calm down?" "I expect you to stop playing into his hands," Nikki said firmly. There was a long silence between them. For the first time since this ordeal began, Kane wasn't reacting out of panic, he was thinking, and that made him far more dangerous. Nikki could say it. "If this is true," Kane said slowly, "then everything changes." "It does." Kane nodded, his jaw tightening. "Then Victor just made a very big mistake." Nikki didn't respond right away. Part of her knew she had just set something in motion that couldn't be undone, but another part of her, the part that had been pushed aside and dismissed, felt a sense of satisfaction. Victor had underestimated her. He wouldn't make that mistake again. Victor Newman didn't like surprises. He especially didn't like losing control of a situation he had carefully designed. For him, every move was calculated, every outcome anticipated. That was what made him so powerful. But Nikki had just introduced an element he hadn't accounted for. And when word reached him that Ashby was no longer reacting the way he expected, Victor knew something had changed. It didn't take long for him to figure out what. Nikki. Of course it was Nikki. Victor's anger simmered beneath the surface as he considered his next move. He wasn't shocked that she had interfered. He knew her well enough to expect a reaction, but the extent of it going directly to Kane and exposing the truth was something else entirely. She hadn't just challenged him. She had sabotaged him. Meanwhile, Kane was no longer chasing shadows. The frantic energy that had driven him was gone, replaced by something colder, more focused. Nikki's revelation had flipped the situation on its head. Now, instead of reacting to Victor's scheme, Kane could respond to it. And that gave him powers. Phyllis Summers was still holding firm when it came to Newman Enterprises, and Kane had been struggling to make any progress there, but now he wasn't distracted, he wasn't desperate. He was strategic. Victor had wanted to break him. Instead, he had sharpened him. Nikki, on the other hand, was fully aware of the storm she had unleashed. She knew Victor would be furious, she knew there would be consequences. But for once, she didn't feel the need to brace for them. There was a strange sense of freedom in no longer protecting Victor's secrets, in no longer standing in the shadow of his decisions. When Victor finally confronted her, the air between them was electric. "You had no right," he said, his voice low but dangerous. Nikki met his gaze without hesitation. "I had every right. You interfered in something you don't understand." "I understand enough," Nikki shot back. "You used people again, you manipulated them, put them through unnecessary stress, all for your own gain." Victor stepped closer. "That's how the world works." "No," Nikki said firmly, "that's how you work." The silence that followed was thick with years of history, love, betrayal, and power struggles. "You think you've won something here?" Victor asked. Nikki didn't flinch. "This isn't about winning, it's about drawing a line." Victor studied her carefully, as if seeing her differently for the first time in a long while. "You've made things more complicated," he said. "Good," Nikki replied. Victor's lips pressed into a thin line. "This isn't over." "It never is with you," Nikki said. And that was the truth. Even as one plan unraveled, Victor was already thinking ahead. He didn't abandon strategies, he adapted them. Ashby might have slipped out of his immediate trap, but that didn't mean he was safe. Far from it. Victor would change tactics. He would find a new angle, a new weakness, a new way to apply pressure. That was what he did best. As for Lily Winters, the end of the charade was approaching. With the truth beginning to surface, there was no reason to continue the illusion. Victor would likely give her the option to return, to step away from the role she had been playing. Matty and Charlie would finally be able to go back to their normal lives, free from a situation they never should have been part of. But the damage had already been done. Trust had been broken. Lines had been crossed, and the ripple effects would be felt for a long time. Kane, now fully aware of the truth, wasn't going to let things go. If anything, this had strengthened his resolve. He wasn't just reacting to Victor anymore, he was preparing to challenge him. And Nikki had changed the game. For years, she had stood beside Victor, sometimes questioning him but ultimately supporting him. Now she had stepped outside that role. She had chosen to act on her own terms. There was no going back from that. The battle lines were shifting, alliances were evolving, and the calm before the next storm was already beginning to fade. Victor Newman might have lost this round, but he was far from finished. And everyone knew it. If you enjoy Y&R spoilers, updates, and daily drama, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe for more videos.